Well, welcome to another episode of the Profit Minded Business, where we're joined with both Logan and Jason of the app called Dropt. And of course, we're joined by Jacob with Drones iVue and Media iVue, or iVue Media. One day I will get that straight. But we come together because we know that as business owners, we tend to suffer silently. We certainly don't have the time to just spend learning from other business owners. So we came together to kind of create an environment and a community where we can learn from each other. We're going to pull from pitfalls that can be avoided, success stories, and we're going to be talking about how people got to where they were at. And I'm really excited to have them here today because they have an interesting story about, how they've gone from being church planners to now running a startup business. And I've heard some really awesome stuff leading up to this, so I'm super excited to have them join us. Jason or Logan, take us away. Tell us how you guys came to be doing what you're doing now, and please tell us about your backstory.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I'll start off a little intro and I'll let Jason kind of fill in as well as we go. But basically, so Jason and I started this thing called Dropt, which is an augmented reality app, and it's been technically live, I guess, for about 2 months in the App Store. But what has led up to this point is us moving to Atlanta with the same initiative to help plant churches in the Dunwoody area of Atlanta. And so we both moved here in February 2016 after being overseas, going to 11 countries in 11 months, helping out different churches and nonprofits around the world, just kind of furthering what they are currently doing and helping them along. And so we were both in the program, didn't know each other while doing the program. First day Jason and I actually met was when we moved into our apartment together. So I pulled up, texted Jason and said, "Hey, this is Logan. I'm here. Can you help me unpack my car?" And so from then we moved in together and started working on this church plant in the area. And so for about a year, we did that until I guess about a year in. Our lease ran up at our apartment complex and we had to move out from where we're currently living, which kind of Jason actually still is with the church. I kind of moved on and started doing counseling work and started going to school to get a master's in counseling. But about 5 months or so after we moved out, I reached out to him. I was like, "Hey, I kind of have this crazy, weird AR idea. I know neither of us are tech, but are you willing to come over, give it a listen, and see what we can make happen? I trust you. I know you. We worked together for a year. So I know your character, and he even has a whole lot more in terms of finance and strategy background than I did in business. My background's more in marketing and psychology, and so I understood that piece, but I really trusted his instincts and strategy and finance more than mine, and so it seemed like a pretty good fit, and so that kind of started this thing going. I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
No, I think you covered it pretty good. It's been a good journey. I do love the fact that Logan and I did not know each other until we moved in. That was a lot of fun. Getting to know him and getting to start a church together, I think, was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. In many ways, it was absolutely our first startup. And we tried to build one in our apartment complex. There we go. And that actually didn't work so well. And so it was pretty much our first failed startup. And then we were still working at the Dunwoody plant, which was the main one we were working at. That was going fine. And then we tried to start a different company outside Dropt. And we did that for maybe a couple months. Maybe. And that one failed. And so Dropt is really, all told, our fourth startup. And so, yeah, we actually do enjoy the startup world, that's for sure.
Well, so one thing I asked you guys was, how did this translate? Like, well, it's all startup. You go from church planning to, technology. It's just all startup. Tell me a little bit. I know with Logan, you said that I have this crazy idea. It's AR. Like, I know we're not tech, but come over and give me a listen. How did that seed get planted within you?
So like Jason had said, we had previously thought about a different startup. And so I think one thing I really learned about myself that I never really knew until I moved to Atlanta is that I really did enjoy creating and thinking about how do you create, how do you cultivate? And I think that's something I learned when I was overseas and then coming to Atlanta, whether it was through helping just create and cultivate community at a church or creating and cultivating a business in a different aspect. I think I just realized oh, I enjoy the thought of creating. I think that's something that the Lord has kind of put in me that I enjoy doing. And so that kind of began to just snowball. And one day I was actually trying to think about like a car safety idea, just because, as anyone knows in Atlanta, you spend so much time in your car. And I was like, how in the world can I make driving, one, more safe in Atlanta, but two, some type of incentive for driving, because there's really not any currently incentive program outside of your car insurance going down, which no one really actively thinks about. And so that was the way I was thinking. But that basically transitioned into this other thought of like, oh, what if I could put some stuff in Piedmont Park, which is a park in Atlanta, and people who liked going outside could actually go to Piedmont Park and collect something. And so that kind of was the first weird kind of like thought I had of like, how can I actually get people to go to parks? How can I get people to go outside? And what brands would actually enjoy people going outside and connecting with their brand and connecting with who they are as a company? And so I kind of noodled on this idea for a while, and then just asked Jason to hear it out and hear his thoughts and to see if we could figure out where it could go.
So I want to kind of clarify something for the listeners. AR is augmented reality.
Correct.
And what's cool about this is that by using our devices, our phones, our tablets, and the camera functionality, we get to actually interact with our current environment. And when you say put things around Piedmont Park, using that video, they actually see these items, or they can go and find these items, kind of like a treasure hunt.
That's correct. Yeah.
Of sorts. And so you were originally thinking about doing this for car safety, same AR type concept?
Not the same AR concept, but the thought of like, if I knew that they were driving and they were spending time at Piedmont Park, because I would have to know their location as they were driving to understand if they're driving safe or not. The thought was like, oh, if they were spending 10 hours at Piedmont Park, then most likely they enjoy being outside. So what if I could reward them? But basically, that seemed not too complicated, but just too like, there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of just actual physical technology had to be built to put in the car. And so I was like, that seems more difficult. What if I could just put the prize in Piedmont Park and get people to go there who already want to be there and potentially go collect this $10 gift card to whatever company.
Right. So the application for businesses is that you get to give them brand awareness with people who are, geotagged near them. So they successfully, capture all the different treasure points. I'm probably not using the right language.
You're doing great. Just keep going.
The treasure points.
Yeah.
And then they go and they redeem it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And your app is referred to dropped shipments, right? Or
not drop shipments, just
Dropt.
dropped.
Just
Okay.
Dropt.
Just Dropt.
Yeah, DROPT. Just Dropt.
okay. And so I've talked to Jason a little bit more about how you guys are planning to use this and scale it and monetize it going forward. But before that, there was going from conception to actually a developed app. What was that process like? Because that's something a lot of people they'll look into the startup world from the outside and like, I have no experience developing apps.
Right.
Like I could never develop an app. Like, can you walk us through that? You said you're both not technology
right.
people.
I can't help but remember you said, "Oh, I know we have nothing to do with technology, but I have this idea."
Right. So you guys developed it yourselves? You guys hired someone? A combination of the both? Or?
Yeah, a combination of the both.
A lot of YouTube. Okay.
A lot of YouTube. So Logan had the idea. We got together. We had honestly, like if you would have said, what is AWS? We would have had no idea that was Amazon Web Service. Like we just had no idea. We didn't even know what web service was. The cloud. I think that's where my photos go. Right. And so our technology experience was limited to actually just engaging with apps on our phone. Yeah. And so we had this idea. We thought, well, we need to hire a developer. And so we did. We raised a little bit of money from the idea. We also contributed some of our own money. And we promptly went and got a developer, didn't know what we're doing, and we wasted a ton of money. And so we got through this process with the developer, and it was the discovery stage. And at the end of it, we realized they had essentially just given to us what we had already given to them and then charged us for it. Right. And so it was a bad experience. Not all developers are like that. But what it taught us is that unless we were willing to do some hard work and build an MVP on our own, we probably weren't going to get there. And so the developers are giving us enough in terms of talking about a couple platforms. One was called the Unity, which we didn't know anything about. So we went and did some research, and YouTube helped us build the marginal viable product for our app. We used that to begin to really test it, build some initial test cases. We got some more friends and family excited to get a little bit more investment. And then that was used as sort of the platform in terms of shaping what actually became Dropt.
All right. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I don't ever, like, there are a few like pictures in my mind that just stand out and will always stand out. And it was funny because more marketing, so I could like kind of think of like the UI of like kind of what it would look like, and I could stumble my way through like Photoshop and Adobe XD enough to kind of think about creating something. Jason is the one who definitely watched a whole lot more YouTube videos in terms of learning how to create something in Unity. But it was so funny, like the days like he would like text me early in the morning, like screenshots, like, dude, I got something up here in AR. And it was like just small victories like every week. And it was like, can it do anything? No. Like, I don't even know what to do with it, but I see it and it's there. And so like we went to a conference one day and he was like, dude, you gotta see my phone. And like pulled out his phone and like there was this card with picked to a parachute in AR. I'm like, can you do anything? No, I can't do anything with it. I'm like, oh, well, let's just screenshot it and make it look like we're doing drops here. And so that was the first time like we'd like fake that we were actually doing drops in places and like would screenshot it and show people like, oh yeah, we dropped this place. No, we didn't. We just trying to make it look like we knew a semblance of what we were doing. But it was like it was those incremental victories that really encouraged us along the way, because truly like we had no technology experience, and to see like small steps like, oh, we are actually slowly learning these things, and it's actually slowly coming into place, and 3 months later, after just a lot of YouTube and a lot of like just copying block code and stuff off the internet, like we actually had a product that worked enough that we actually went to a couple colleges around Atlanta and said, hey, collect this and you will get a gift card that Jason had geniusly figured out how to tie into, was it Google something? I don't know. It basically sent in an email that had a gift card in it that they had collected. And so, that was very much our first product and just testing it out. And from there, able to get another developer to actually take it from there to build it out more.
So
Nice.
You mentioned the previous startups as well. Like, were any of those technology oriented, or what experience were you able to translate from those into this new one if they weren't technology oriented?
The church plants obviously weren't technology oriented, but a couple of the other ones, well, the other one we started for like 2 months, technically if it would have gone forward, it would have been technology oriented, but it was so much of a idea that I wouldn't even consider it technology oriented in terms of it never had legs. It never even had nubs or anything. It's just like it was just there. Yeah. And so if it ever got flushed out, it would have been in technology, but wasn't even that close.
Okay. So now, again, for a lot of people that may be listening, they don't really know how AR can be used, and make it useful. Something I've talked to Jason about that I love is it's a useful version of Pokemon Go that makes it understandable, not just for young kids, but even people like my mom, who, when that was the hottest thing out, that got people like my mom interested in AR. They weren't thinking about it as AR. Right. They were just thinking about it as a cool thing that they can do on their phone in real life. Talk about how you're looking to make AR useful and hopefully part of someone's everyday life, right? More so than just walking and playing a game on your phone.
And don't get too far down in your big picture, because I think there's some areas where it's in development.
Right.
We don't want you to give away a great idea.
We're not going to give you our trade secrets.
No, I don't want to hear that.
I see you people trying to steal our ideas.
But the idea being that, like, how does anybody develop, an idea like that and actually put it into a daily practice? Like, you guys actually had to schedule out certain milestones. Like, how did you take this and make it not just, the direction of making AR useful, but how did you actually decide how you were going to run your day to day in order to get there?
Maybe we'll start at one point. So maybe talk about, if you guys are able to, a couple use cases that were,
Sure.
oh, wow, there's actually some legs to this. There's some company, some user that would actually want to use this and actually pay for it.
Yeah. Well, our first idea was actually for REI. So that was the initial thought, was what if, like, he told me what he was thinking, and he had already thought about REI. Like, what if REI could drop tents or sleeping bags or shoes or whatever the heck it is in a public park or in a place where REI can connect with their users, and people can go over there, find this stuff, collect it, and then go redeem it in the store. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with REI's Black Friday. It's hashtag opt outside. And so basically they're not open day after Thanksgiving. They close the stores and they encourage everybody to go outside. And so our thought was like, oh my gosh, what if on Black Friday, REI dropped $1 million worth of camping gear all over the country and people could go outside and just find this stuff.
Right.
And so I think that was the use case for me. I was an outdoors guy. I grew up in Seattle. And so I was just like, this would be epic.
Yeah.
And so that was a use case that really spurred me on in terms of, especially when we were developing and we weren't getting very far some of those weeks.
Yeah.
And it was us spending, all night trying to figure some section of code out or whatever it was. And that kind of idea was like, oh man, but maybe someday I'll walk around in the mountains and I'll collect something free from REI.
Lantern.
Right?
There it is on the rock.
Right. I got the bike. Yes.
Yes.
And so I think that was one of the first initial cases that we had. You want to talk about another one?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways it was just once Jason had even kind of built out this initial MVP, this like minimal viable product of like what it could look like, had really no functionality outside of collecting one thing and then it just sending an email to your email saying, hey, you collected this. But when we took that to different colleges, a couple different colleges, and it got people to do it, the reactions were always like, whoa, wow, that's great. Like, that's so cool. And like, all I have to do is collect this and then I get this, like nothing else. I'm like, yeah, just that. That's all you have to do.
No sweepstakes, no magazines.
Exactly, yeah. No smokes, no mirrors. Like, it's just that, it's that
Yeah,
simple. I think like seeing their excitement, and then since we were able to then track if they redeemed it, to then really track like, oh, not only did they actually seem excited in person, but then we were able to track and say, oh, 30% redeemed it within 24 hours, or whatever it was in that moment. And so I think that was a big part of it for us, was seeing the actual user's excitement, but then also seeing that they actually redeemed it and actually moved them to action, was a big indicator for us. Like, oh, maybe people will actually use this and it actually will drive traffic. So that's kind of the first.
That's cool. What tell us a little bit more about how your faith plays into this. Knowing that you guys are church planners and your history a little bit. If someone's listening is also a Christian and they're trying to figure out, they've got an idea. What are some words of encouragement, or even some how to avoid a pitfall, like hiring a developer and not knowing your thing and stuff like that? What's something you would say to someone on a faith-based level?
I would say, I guess first thing comes to mind in terms of just if someone is like, hey, I am looking to try to start something, what's your experience as a Christian starting something? I would really, I think this is probably a general statement of like really just for us, I would just seek advice from people who are in the industry. I think it's one of the things that we did pretty well at first, was just like, okay, let's be pretty honest and vulnerable that we don't really know anything and like actually seek advice. I think oftentimes in business, you can kind of have this perception of like, I need to be able to fake that I know something. And there are definitely times we probably try to feel like we faked that we knew something. But I think the big part for us was that we just were vulnerable enough. We were willing to say, hey, honestly, we don't know. And we're willing to put ourselves in a situation to ask somebody, what do you think about this? Where would you go from here? What are your thoughts on this? And just being real about where we are. I think just in general, I think when it comes to business, one thing we try to do pretty well early on, and honestly it's been a really struggle for us, but figuring out what it looks like is any company you start, it just takes a lot of time. And then that's the reality, especially when you have two people doing 100% of the work. It's not like we can give somebody else some work. It's Jason and I doing everything. And so for us, we've been tried to be intentional about taking a Sabbath, or just taking one day that we just rested and didn't think about Dropt. Now, if you ask us how successful that's been, it's kind of been hit or miss, if we're honest. But that's something that we think is valuable and important. One thing you see in startups oftentimes is burnout, people just constantly working. Or one thing, unfortunately, you hear a lot about is like just families that suffer, or relationships that suffer. And for Jason and I, like at least for myself, like I got married 6 months ago, and so the company, we kind of launched initially a very soft launch, like May of 2018, and then I got married in September of 2018. Yes, September. And one thing has been difficult of like, how do I make sure my wife feels more honored and valued and cared for than my company does? She is not, my company is not more important than she is. My company is not more important than most of my relationships in my life. And so how do I steward those things well? How do I love my wife well? How to love my friends well? How to love my community well? More than I do this company that, yeah, it's great. I hope it's successful, but in the day, they're incredibly more valuable than this thing will ever be worth.
Well, so please elaborate. Because that's the running theme, is that it's difficult to, come home and share and be transparent and, manage our own emotional roller coaster ride. So yeah, please tell us more about that, because we're all like on the edge of our seats.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll share, and then I'll let Jason if you have any other additional thoughts. But like for me, I think the one big thing that's consistent, and I think it's the beauty of, in my mind, like my relationship with the Lord, is that everything changes in life. I mean, Dropt is here today. Most likely, the reality is it's not going to be here in 100 years. And there's so many things, whether it's health, relationships, so many things that change in life. Business changes, but for us, there's one thing that really we believe stays the same. That's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and that's the Lord. That's our relationship with God. That's our relationship with Jesus. And because of that, the reality is, even if everything is terrible that day at work, and no one answers our calls, or everyone answers our calls and says, this is dumb, we don't want to talk to you about it, the reality is, when I go home to my wife, I go home still as a child of God, and not so much of not somebody whose company is just not doing well. And so I think, for me, anxiety at this point honestly hasn't been that big of a struggle, simply because I know no matter what, when I go home, my identity is not based upon how well Dropt does. If Dropt does well, wonderful. If Dropt doesn't do well, I'm still the same person, and it does not have a eternal value on my life. And so that's kind of really how I've, I guess, managed my anxiety, or even like being willing to talk to Jenny about the realities. Jenny's my wife's name. The realities of the company and the difficulties. And like, honestly, didn't go well today. I don't really know what's happening. I'm not sure if things are going further. I'm not sure if we'll be a company in a month. Like, those things I can be honest with her about, because I think she knows, and I know both, no matter what, this isn't our life. This isn't our identity. And that's really helpful for us to dialogue about. And I think just the reality, even emotionally with a spouse and emotionally with anybody, is people are pretty intuitive. I mean, in terms of like, they can look at your face and like, hey, what's going on? Nothing, I'm fine. Okay, come on. Like, I won't annoy you and keep asking you, but we both know that something is happening. And so I think this builds tension if there's unspoken things between your spouse when you go home that you just don't want to share. They know you don't want to share. I think it's healthier to be able to be vulnerable, say, hey, I don't really want to talk about this whole lot right now, but this is the reality, and I just want you to know, because this is on my mind, and I don't want to seem distant. I don't want to seem like I'm not listening to you. This is just what's happening. Just being willing to share that, and sit in that discomfort sometimes, because it is uncomfortable to not always share success stories. But that's also the truth of startups.
Yeah. That's great. Appreciate you sharing that. That was perfect.
Jason, do you have any thing to share about experiences of, your work life affecting your relationship life, and how, they kind of cross in, and how you're able to interweave them together? Because, I mean, that's all easier said than done at the end of the day.
I think so. I think part of my personal story in this startup is much less about the startup itself and much more about my relationship with the Father. And so for me, I'm excited about business because I just enjoy business. I've been reading the Wall Street Journal since I was like 8. And so I got $2 a week for allowance, and I would walk to the store and buy the Wall Street Journal.
Really?
It cost $2. So, it'd take me all week to read it. It's a big thing. So the print was real small. But I love business, but what actually gets me up every day and gets me through those days where, like Logan said, you are making all these calls and nobody wants to talk to you. Everybody thinks your idea is terrible and investors don't want to listen to you, is really my greatest cheerleader is God. And he's sitting there showing me and walking me through this process and drawing me closer to him. And so I would say this has been a very big journey for me in terms of personal healing. And so I am not going to lie, like I'm not one of those founders that is great. Like I wouldn't consider myself an amazing founder or like one of those atypical founders. I am typically a very unemotional individual, but I'm working really hard to try to get emotions back. I don't think it is very healthy for, to have that atypical founder that's like grinding it out all the time and is, very impenetrable. Like Logan said, like the vulnerability piece is really important. And I think that this startup, Dropt, working with Logan, starting a church, all that kind of stuff has taught me that being a vulnerable leader in business is much more powerful than being an invulnerable leader.
Yeah.
Now, speaking to that, but also tying it back into, I know you said you were from Seattle. How has the culture been different for you? How have you been able to adapt to that? Because, we're in the Bible Belt where I know on the West Coast, a lot of religion isn't as accepted, or organized religion isn't quite as accepted. Has that played a factor in moving here, or happiness, or,
I don't think so. I mean, I think, I left Seattle and I went and traveled the world for a year. So I was exposed to a ton of different cultures. And the South is just another culture.
Right.
And so I try to be as respectful as I can. You definitely don't do things down in the South the way we would probably do them in Seattle, which is great. I mean, that's what diversity is all about. I love that the conversation around diversity, racial reconciliation, all that kind of stuff is a big deal here. It definitely wasn't a part of my life before I got here. And so I have been opened up to all these new conversations that are awesome. Logan's always talking to me about this stuff. It's very important to him. And honestly, it's been a huge blessing to be able to move down to a culture and just see the United States differently.
Right.
Because we have a certain view in Seattle. It's a great view. I love it. I'm probably more concerned about the trees than I am individuals, but that's just a part of what we do. So, but yeah, it's been a good journey, I think.
So what else is different in Seattle as far as, doing business or the way people interact? Or like in the North, they're more direct.
Yeah.
Is there something more that you could describe that culture there to here?
If we're talking about the startup culture, I think one of the biggest differences is probably, the South. I would say that investors are typically a lot safer here in the South, right? A lot of wealth in the South was grown up through real estate and all that kind of stuff, which is very predictable, very safe. Whereas, I come from Seattle, so we've got some pretty big companies you might have heard of, like Microsoft and Amazon and
some eccentric people.
Some big stuff. And so I mean, there is a much different type of investment community and startup community, right?
Sure.
We have what's called back of the napkin investing. That's pretty normal in Seattle. You come up with an idea on the back of a napkin and somebody gives you some money to figure out if it'll work. That's not super common, but it's the idea that they are a lot more acceptant of certain risks.
Right.
Whereas down here, they call a startup a company that's been around for 3 years and has steady revenue. And we're like, that's not a startup, So I'd say that on the business side, that's probably the big difference. But I do think that the South is coming up. So, I think things are changing. There's some awesome groups in Atlanta. They're really working hard to change that stereotype. And some other cities in the South are also doing a lot of good work in this. So I think it's moving.
Now, speaking of the groups in Atlanta, what are some of the groups you're a part of? There's the Tech Village. Like, kind of dive into how you're accessing the technology groups here.
If I can add on to this really quick. So Jason and I actually met through an organization called Tech Alpharetta, and that's just one of the many, incubators around, especially the North Metro Atlanta area, where, it definitely isn't the typical Silicon Valley culture that you see on TV or, if you actually go out there. But it is, even in the short time I've been involved in, here in Tech Alpharetta, year and a half or so, I mean, it is changing, and it is changing pretty rapidly. And that's by and large of Atlanta being a transplant city. People are coming over, exposing new ideas where, hey, there's other ways to make money in investing other than real estate, which is, again, all too common here. So, if you could talk about some of your experiences with some of these other organizations like the ATDC, Atlanta Tech Village. Have you gone to others as well? Especially some of our local listeners might like to hear where they might be able to get some guidance that may have helped you guys out.
Yeah. So honestly, this is something that we have done a lot better. Especially Jason's done a lot better in the last 6 months than in the first. Well, the idea of this whole thing came about in May of 2016.
Maybe, yeah.
May of 2017. Yeah, because it hasn't been 2 years. May of 2017. So from May of 2017 till about 6 months ago, we were actually really bad about networking because once we had this whole thought, and this is hopefully encouraging for different business owners, people with ideas, thinking about starting a startup, we were really nervous people was just going to steal our idea. The whole thought, like, okay, let's not go to these places because most likely, like, these people know tech, these people know these things more than we do at this point, and they're probably all going to run with our idea. The reality is what we've experienced in the last 6 months, they've been nothing but welcoming, nothing but like encouraging, nothing but helpful, and just really willing to do basically anything they can do for us to help us, our startup, and I'm sure other startups as well, along in the journey. And that's so great. For us, we've been with ATDC, and we go to some of the stuff that ATDC offers. We've been networked with a few people at ATV that have really encouraged us to meet quite a bit with. This one guy there that's really been super helpful for us at ATV. And then outside of those, we've also been networked in Ignite HQ, which is up in Marietta. Is that right? Marietta. And then additionally, this place called Creative Media Industries Institute, which is at Georgia State. And so really, because the reality is they all have different strengths, and they all have different things they offer. And in my mind, like, if you're interested in getting into technology, if you're interested in getting into startups, if you're interested into getting business in general in Atlanta, like, learn from them all. Like, go just understand what they're doing there, get to know them, hear their stories, hear kind of how they got there, because that's really what they love to know. They love to know your story. They love to know how you came upon their group, and just kind of what you're hoping to learn from them, what you're hoping to gain from them, and how they can best walk alongside you. And so those are some of those incubators, but we also have worked a lot out of Plywood Place, which is, I guess technically Plywood People is the name of it, but Plywood is in Cabbagetown, and it's basically a co-working space of startups that are doing good. So if you are looking to create a startup that is focused on doing good and doesn't have to be nonprofit, can be nonprofit, but really want to just impact the world in a really cool way, check out Plywood, because they have a lot of cool stuff that they're doing. And
where's that at?
It's in Cabbagetown.
Where's Cabbagetown?
So Cabbagetown is kind of next to Grant Park in East Atlanta area. And so there's a little street called Carroll Street, and it's on that street, which is a very interesting street to navigate via driving if you're ever driving on Carroll Street. But there also will be moving in the next year?
I think so.
Next year to the west side, kind of next to where the west side Beltline is, next to where Monday Night Garage and those places. So.
Now, Jason, do you have any to add on to it? Because, I haven't ran into Logan anywhere, but it always seemed to be running into you, especially in the last couple months at different tech-related networking events. So I know that you've kind of made the leap into doing more networking, and then
I mean, I think Logan did a really good job of summarizing. We have met some incredibly amazing people, that have really encouraged us and given us some really good feedback and sometimes some really tough feedback. And we have been really blessed. I love to joke and say that Logan and I are actually really bad networkers, but God's really good at it. Because when we think about the stories that we have about how we network to people, it is random. Like it's
Right.
it's not random, but just to us there seems to be like this divine guidance that's like the Lord just being like, look, I got this, don't worry about it. But yeah, I am spending a lot more time at Tech Alpharetta because it's about 10 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
It's super convenient. But I definitely would encourage entrepreneurs to put time and invest in networking because I wish we had done this when we first started because you meet some really good people with really good advice that could be really critical in terms of not making the same mistakes we did.
No, yeah. One thing that I would like to add on to that is, especially through my time at Tech Alpharetta, where I've spent the most of my time in the tech and startup community, is it's so easy for startup owners to get caught up in just product development and, trying to refine it before they even have any sort of customers identified not saying that you can't, build a business successfully that way, but, it's just so common that, people will want to have their product perfect before even going and talking to someone.
Yeah.
In reality,
Wish you would have told us that about a year ago.
but yeah, I'm sure you've seen it,
Yeah.
It's all too common in the startup community, and it's really unfortunate, and I don't know what led me to just kind of do it kind of naturally, but,
Yeah.
Not saying that's the best way either, but the way I've heard it, from many people, it's people change your life, not necessarily a product or, a business or whatever else. It's typically someone that you meet who's going to have that impact for you, make the right connection or, give you the right advice or guidance. So,
yeah, I will say that if you are in the Atlanta area, there are a lot of great places that you can connect to learn some of this stuff, right? Like ATDC is a good one. They force you to go through customer discovery, which honestly was very helpful for us. I wish we would have done customer discovery at the beginning of this before we built the product. And so, yeah, there's just people that are much wiser than you. And if you can sort of get over this hump that, unless your idea is has a whole bunch of very patentable super secrets, you can probably share it with these folks. Because just my kid's always going to be better than your kid. My business idea is probably going to be better than yours. So I'm probably not going to waste a lot of time trying to copy your idea.
right.
And so, yeah, definitely try to just lean in and trust people more.
Yeah, that's another, point where you just don't get the people worried about, developing the product and even sharing about the product that they're developing.
Yeah.
But you also get the people that don't want to share anything.
Yeah.
And, that was, my mindset, while I was still in school, still before I even started out, I'm still starting out. But I remember one guy in particular, he came into a Friday startup circle meeting at Tech Alpharetta, and he was like, oh yeah, this great idea, and, it's going to be a revolutionary new app or platform, and wouldn't talk anything about it. It's like, how do you expect to get help if you're not even going to tell us what you're trying to do? And that's another point that I think would help a lot of startups, certainly help me, is, what are you trying to achieve? Long term, are you trying to achieve an exit? Are you trying to build something for your life? Start from there. You can always, develop a flight plan, so to speak. I kind of look at it in that way. And as long as you know where you're going, you can deviate from that path. Yeah. But, it's a fine line of, seeing what works in the moment, throw the spaghetti out the wall and see what sticks method, and having some sort of strategy, a plan, and knowing where you want to be, and being able to adapt along the way. Where do you guys think you fall under that spectrum? Did you guys really just start out, we want to see where this takes us? Did you guys have an idea of where you wanted to be at the end of it all, or
you want to answer that, Logan?
Still trying to figure that out, or?
I mean, I'll give you my answer and then we'll see if it matches. But I mean, I've always wanted to do business. But honestly, like I was 2 days away from moving back to Seattle. Like I had my car packed, ready to go. And Logan brought this idea, and I was like, you know, what the heck? Like I'm 30. I was in my 30s. And so I just thought, when am I going to be able to do it? And so honestly, I really wasn't thinking too far into the future. And so I do think that because we've pulled some people into our life that can sort of speak into these, I think I've changed my mindset, right? Now I've started thinking more of like, okay, where do I really want to be in 10 years? And is this a good way to get me there? Both on a personal level, but also on a business level. And so I would say I definitely started off way on this end where I didn't have a plan at all. But I think I'm getting to this comfortable middle place.
Yeah, I mean, mine's not far from that. I really it was like a fun idea, cool idea. I thought it would be interesting to figure out if we could start, and I shared it with Jason, and that was about the like extent of my projection of like, when do we want to sell? Do we want to go public? Like, what do we want to do? Like, I didn't even think that was not even a thought in my mind. I think personally, after coming back from overseas and started playing this church, my whole thought was, well, I'll pastor and then I might go back overseas at some point. And that was kind of my desire. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. I started going to grad school to get my master's in counseling so I could go overseas and essentially do counseling in different countries that have experienced different traumas. And so my whole path was that until this whole thing came about. And that's been interesting for marriage because when my wife and I met, we both met with the concept of going overseas. And so now it's kind of been like
throwing a wrench in the game. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's been a really interesting conversation navigating like, hey babe, I know we met with this thought, but now I kind of have this thing that we've invested money in, other people invested money in. Like I can't just drop it and say deuces and walk. I feel like I have to steward this well. I feel like that's something that, and what even Jason was saying in terms of how things have been connected, like there's not a part of me that doesn't feel like we weren't supposed to be here in some context, because if this thing wasn't going to happen, this thing would have stopped a long time ago, just because of what we didn't know and what we didn't come into this thing with. Like, and so the fact that this thing has snowballed to where it is today, I feel pretty confident that this is where the Lord has me, even though, which is a very difficult for me to think through and the tension to weigh through sometimes, because I'm like, God, like, I just wanted to go overseas. Like, I didn't want to deal with all this stuff. And now I feel like my whatever year plan of just going back overseas has now been thwarted. Yeah. Now my wife doesn't know when we're going back overseas, and she's wanting to know when the next thing's happening. And like, I don't have a good answer for anybody. And so I kind of feel like I'm just weighing through this thing, hoping and praying that there's some sort of end to this.
How are you guys modeling out the financials? Like, do you know that when you get a certain level of traction that how it takes off? Like, do you...
Next question.
$1 million question.
I'm going to take a really bad crack at this. So my background is finance and strategy. I spent 10 years working with some utilities on the West Coast, do financial planning and revenue modeling and all that kind of stuff. And so I, like Logan, I very slyly deceived him because he thought I'd be really helpful in finance, and it turns out a startup's finances are not the same as a company that's been around for 100 years. I never thought about that. The thing about startup finances is they don't exist. So how do you model something that doesn't exist? And so I actually wasted about a month doing this before a good friend of mine was like, you just don't model it, Jason. And so I just didn't model it. But I think in terms of thinking about finances and where we go, we had this initial investment. And so a good friend of Jacob's and I has a talk that he does about the 3 types of revenue. There's reoccurring revenue, there's break-even revenue, and there's profitable revenue. And our goal is just to get to reoccurring revenue.
Yeah.
Our expenses are very low. The initial build out, of course, we have a laundry list of 800 things we'd like to change about the app. In all reality, maybe 5 of those are actually necessary. But our goal and our focus from a finance standpoint is just to get to reoccurring revenue. Can we get some customers that like our product, that want to tell their friends about it, and that will pay us $1 to use it. And then I think the next stage after that is, once we can begin to prove that, then go to some investors, share with them sort of how we feel like we can scale this, what that might look like, what the returns might be, and then see if we can get to one of these other revenues. But right now, our real focus is just reoccurring revenue.
Sure. And, you guys received some investments from friends and family initially. What were those conversations like? Like, it's probably pretty hard to go and say, I have this idea. Here's my napkin. Will you invest? What was that like for you guys emotionally and at the same time?
Yeah.
What was that like?
I'll have something to add, so don't worry.
Yeah. It was vulnerable. Definitely vulnerable. I honestly don't think I even expected an investment. I think I was just more of just sharing with people. And then once actually a few people got back and said, hey, I would actually be interested in doing this, I was kind of shocked. I don't know if you were kind of shocked. I was kind of shocked. And so I think it was definitely, and Jason and I are playful with this and joke about this, but I think the reality is that we definitely do take what we're doing seriously, because it became very serious all of a sudden somebody actually gave us $1. And so it was all of a sudden like, oh, this isn't just Jason and I's monopoly money that we're throwing around now. This is someone's money they've actually earned that they're willing to actually invest. And so for us, that became a very, all of a sudden, I really feel like I'm in a part of life where we're really learning what stewardship looks like and how do you steward well. And I think for us, in my mind, it was very much like, okay, someone actually gave us something. How do we steward this thing well? And I think the conversation with them was, it was pretty straightforward in terms of like, we, in some ways, obviously early on, we didn't have a whole lot of insight of like understanding how we would exit. And I think even for friends and family, they don't even care so much. Well, some of them might, but ours didn't so much like how you're going to exit, but it was just more of like, what's your strategy and what's your plan? And obviously it's changed over time, but even initially our strategy and plan is still pretty close to what we were doing today. And so I think they saw that, they saw the vision, and they really wanted to support us and encourage us. And I always take a risk. I think anything at that point is taking a risk, especially when there is no revenue coming in. And so I think understanding that and honoring that risk and being willing to say, hey, I acknowledge this is a risk. Are you sure you actually want to invest? I'm genuine, make sure they're on board. And then something we honestly haven't done super well, but we need to do better at, is a continual conversation with them and a continual update with them and letting them know, because there are days, honestly, there's weeks where in a startup where it doesn't seem like things are moving super fast because the companies you're trying to talk to or people like that, they move slower. And so for us, what seems like a week for us is a month for someone. And so there's weeks where we probably should reach out to people who've invested and just fill them in, but nothing's happened this week. Well, the reality is it doesn't matter that nothing's happened this week. The reality is we just need to be in contact with them and honor that and steward that. And so I think honestly we probably haven't done that nearly as well as we should. I think I very much am aware of that and see that's something that we need to change in terms of if we have people that are willing to come on board with us and invest, that we honor that commitment. So
I think it's great. Appreciate y'all sharing that.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Not just for investment, but just communication in general is so often is easier not to say something when things aren't going well, and just I'll just update them again when things are going well, and then 3 months has passed, and it's that's not fair to anyone. You're not doing yourself justice, you're not doing them justice, and that's something. To a much smaller degree, I had a same oh wow, someone's willing to put money behind this. When I was in school, I did a school-wide business plan competition up at Middle Tennessee State, and this older gentleman, he was a trade show judge, and he saw what we were doing, and even just $500, he gave us a grant for $500, and I was like, oh wow, someone's willing to take their money and actually give it to us, and hey, they believe in what we're doing to some degree, where that money doesn't come for free,
Yeah, exactly.
And I couldn't imagine that from, feeling that pressure from someone family. Because heck, I even asked my grandfather, a couple of years back, just for $1,000 just to buy like my first drone, and got shot down. But,
Go, Grandpa.
Yeah, but honestly, like, you find a way around it, and luckily with the nature of our business, even though it's not where we're wanting to be with our business, with a platform, going forward, we were able to start, just bringing in revenue, because my kind of philosophy was, if we ever were to go for investment and, kind of more open-minded to it now, more so than ever, is no one's going to want to invest in me if I can't make money without money, because, if you can't make money without money, you probably can't make money with money either. And that was like a realization that, I had to work through, for, I don't know, while I was still in school, and then, just getting out of school, because I got put on a timeline from my parents. Like, you have 6 months, show us some progress, do something, or else your butt's going back in school. And I was like, that's not going to happen, because I originally wanted 18 months. And I imagine it would have been totally different, because it did take me a little while to, get started and, get serious about what I'm doing. And, again, I couldn't imagine having that sort of pressure, having family member, and I can, because my dad actually is, a partner of the business to some degree. I mean, he helps me out. I still live at home. So like that, thank you for sharing that, because I mean, that's again, something that probably goes overlooked by a lot of people looking from the outside, that it's not just all rainbows and butterflies and you get money and now all of your problems are taken care of.
Yeah.
No, you have a lot more responsibility now as a result.
Well, the word that I kept hearing throughout this entire message, especially with you, Logan, is the word steward. And I think I'm probably one thing that I'm going to walk away from today as we kind of wrap up is really being a steward of what we're given in life, whether it's our family, our wife, our children, our relationships, our blessings from God, all the way down to opportunities with funding. It's like, to be a good steward is where our identity should lay, right?
Right.
Being a child of God, but even a steward of that relationship, but the word steward continually will probably mean something to me as I walk away from this. That was really appreciate it. Is there one thing, looking back on all the things that we've talked about, that you'd want to share with someone out there listening right now? I feel like there's so much good content here, but is there one thing that really pops for you guys?
If you want, I could start. It might make it easier. Actually, touching on the steward thing, in entrepreneurship, a lot of people look at it, you're working for yourself, when in reality, you are not just working for the investors, your family, you're working for literally everyone else around you. And I think, that's quite the opposite of what most people think when they think of, oh yeah, I'm a free person, I'm an entrepreneur. No, you're tied down with a lot more responsibility than, just the typical 9 to 5 where you're actually working for yourself.
Go ahead. I mean, I do, but go first.
Okay. Well, hopefully we won't say the same thing, or if we do, then it just means double true, I think is what it means. I think, there's a couple things come to mind. I think one, in terms of what I would just encourage anybody with that's wanting to start something in general, is I think just the reality of like understanding where you are in life, what opportunities you have, what time you have. And the difficulty of anybody trying to start something is that there's always this thought of like, maybe I'll start it later. I'm not in the best place to start it now. And I think this comes down in some ways to stewardship, is like, like if you have 30 minutes in a week, if you have an hour in a week, like just take the time to brainstorm. Just steward the little time you have, steward the emotions that you have when you have them to do it. Oftentimes you might be tired. You're trying to figure out how to start something while you're also working another job, while you also have a family. There's so much going on. And so it's difficult to start something when you're already just have so much going on in life. And so I would say just finding those few moments to steward, to think through things. But I think also once you do think of something, and like, if it ever does involve technology, which we've learned very much, I would encourage anyone to not try to start it with technology, but figure out if they can figure out how to do the business without technology. And so technology is the hassle, it's a whole lot, it's expensive. And so learning and test your hypothesis of your company, of your business model without technology as much as possible before you ever mention technology in the question. Because once you think about technology, I think oftentimes people kind of get pigeonholed into the thought of, I need technology. And once you get in that pigeonhole, it's hard to get out. And so think about how you can do it without technology, prove it. If you can prove it, and then technology would enhance it, great. But don't just be a technology company. Be your own company in which technology just basically enhances. And so that's kind of what I would speak to.
It's good.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to second the last thing he said, for sure. I think on the spiritual side for me, I think the one thing I have sort of taken from this and sort of would pass on is, I came from a background that was very sort of conservative, and in Seattle of all places, but just this idea that, that we are children of God and that we can do well in business. Like, those two are not mutually exclusive. And in a lot of ways, they're very, very powerful together. And so I would just like to encourage folks that it's like when the Lord invited me into starting a company, he very much said, look, I have wired you a certain way for business. This is how I am going to draw you closer to me. And so it becomes a very spiritual thing almost, right? Like, a lot of times business, and the Lord was just talking to me about this yesterday in my quiet time, was like, look, business is you playing with me, and that's a great place to play, and it's okay, right? And so I think just realizing that for business owners, especially if you have faith and you're a believer, like, this is a really cool adventure with you and the Father, and that you can look at it that way as a man or a woman who's just hanging out with the Father every day.
I love it. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yeah, really quick, can I turn the tables on you and ask
Sure.
one thing that you would maybe pass along, not just from this conversation, but...
Well, for me, it was the steward thing.
Okay.
I mean, that's so big. Really, it's, juggling as many balls as we juggle as business owners, it's easy to drop the things that don't yell at us. It's easy to just deal with the squeaky wheel all the time, and the ones that aren't loud and aren't really right there in your face, sometimes can be neglected. And so it's really important to take the time. And that's probably my weakest area, is being able to, because I juggle so many things, to be a better communicator, for sure, when it comes to the non-squeaky wheels.
I think that's an area where we can all improve.
Yeah.
That's true.
But,
Very true.
all right.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. It's been a real pleasure. Tell the audience, how can they reach out to you? You've got a great platform. It's not just a startup. It is an actual platform that can be used, can be helpful to business owners. Around here in the Atlanta area specifically, the Piedmont Park idea was a fantastic way business owners can use what you have as a technology base. You've talked a little bit about using some ideas on the Beltline. Really cool stuff of how business owners who are within that area can actually drive traffic to their location and make it really fun, really engaging, and really kind of develop a relationship with their customer base that other business owners aren't aware of yet. So it's better to go ahead and get in on the front line of something like this, and before it becomes so pervasive that they're just one of many things to do. Right now, once they hear about, the Dropt app, like, if they're not plugged in, they may miss the boat on how cool this is going to be. So how can they reach out to you guys and ask of, how can they get plugged into your app and start running business to their business?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways that any kind of company, brand, sports team, whoever would want to begin to use the Dropt platform, they could reach out to us. One is through email. They could email us, Jason and I, directly at our email. Mine is, both of ours are just our name. So like mine's logan.kafer@droptinc.com. So it's the name of the company, inc.com. Jason is jason.kelley@droptinc.com. I'm sure we can put that in the...
Absolutely, yeah. You'll see it down below. But you spell Dropt, not D-R-O-P-P-E-D. You spell it D-R-O-P-T.
Correct, D-R-O-P-T. The reason that actually got started was because we kept talking about dropping these things into places. We can drop one in Peanut Park. We can drop one on the Beltline. And then it just hit us one day. I was like, oh, why don't we just call this thing Dropt? But D-R-O-P-P-E-D just looked clunky. Just looked not, sleek. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sleek, yeah.
And so D-R-O-P-T just looked a lot better and sounded the same. So we went with that. And so yeah, D-R-O-P-T. And so you can email us. You can go to our website, which is droptinc.com. Also, if you are a user and you're using the app, or even if you're a business using the app, there's also a messaging capability within the app that if you send a message, it would send a message straight to our email as well.
And right now they can find the app on whether it's an Apple or an Android. They just go to the App Store.
Yeah, it's
and
on iOS.
Type in Dropt.
Yeah, it's on iOS and Google Play Store. So for Android and Apple. And yeah, search Dropt, D-R-O-P-T, and start collecting some fun stuff in AR.
And if they collect the right things in the right place, they get some sort of a gift of sorts that then...
Redeemable item.
Yeah, correct. I mean, just for example, currently we have there's a brewery in town called New Realm, and so we've dropped a few New Realm logos around the city of Atlanta. And so if you collect a New Realm logo, you get a $7 voucher to New Realm that appears directly into the wallet, and you can then go into New Realm and redeem your $7 voucher and enjoy a new cool brewery in town.
Nice. Perfect application right there.
That's right.
Great. And Jacob, thank you so much for co-hosting and being a part of this. How can they reach out to you? I know that you are the mastermind behind the video production here and the editing. Tell them how a business could engage with you to do corporate videos, deal with the insurance type stuff, as well as doing a podcast similar to this.
Yeah, so go to iVue Media or iVue Media Online. iVue.media is the website. So that's www.ivue.media. Or you can find me LinkedIn, email me directly, jacob.andrews@ivue.media. I'm accessible. Find me online, and look forward to hearing from you.
Great. And my name is Corbin Cook, and I run SMB Strategy Consultants, and I'm a partner with the Auxilium Group, where I am a fractional CFO and part of a fractional executive leadership team. So we work with companies in the 250 up to about 30 million, and we come in and provide great insights, cash flow analysis, like we were talking about. And
remember this information.
Write it down. And then, of course, with the team behind Auxilium Group, we provide a full fractional executive team for operations, sales, marketing, and talent and team development. So thank you so much. You can obviously find me on some of the information you see here on the website, wherever you're at. You can always reach me at 404-783-3305, especially if you want to maybe join us on the show one day. We'd love to hear from you as well. So reach out to me or Jacob directly. So thanks for joining us.
All the information will be down below.
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for having us.
Yeah,
it's been
thanks.
great.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.